Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. We're so excited to have you here with us today. If you've been looking for ways to make English a natural part of your thoughts and conversations, then you're in the right place.
That's right, Emma. Today, we're going to be talking about some really practical tips to help you start thinking and speaking in English with more ease. Whether you're just starting out or have been learning English for a while, we've got some great insights that can help you take that next step.
By the end of this episode, you'll have learned specific techniques to train your brain to think in English and boost your confidence in speaking it. So make sure to stay with us until the end. We've got a ton of tips to share. James, I think one of the biggest challenges for English learners is not just understanding the language, but actually thinking in it. It's one thing to learn vocabulary and grammar, but it's another to make English feel natural. Have you experienced this with any other language?
Absolutely, Emma. When I was learning Spanish, I remember constantly translating in my head. I'd think of what I wanted to say in English first, and then try to find the Spanish words. It was exhausting. And I think many English learners go through that same struggle.
Yes, and that's why today's topic is so important. We want to help our listeners move away from translation and start thinking in English directly. That's the key to speaking naturally and confidently.
Right, we'll talk about techniques that have been proven to work. And we'll also give you some phrases and expressions you can start using immediately. Plus, we've got a fun example conversation coming up to help demonstrate how these tips can play out in real life.
Okay, James, let's start with a simple situation. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and you want to order a drink. Let's do a little role play so that our listeners can get a feel for how a natural conversation might go.
Sounds good. I'll be the customer, and you'll be the barista.
Hi, I'd like a large cappuccino, please.
Of course. Would you like any extra shots of espresso in that?
Yes. I'll take one extra shot. And can you add a little cinnamon on top?
Absolutely. We'll have that ready for you in just a moment.
Great, thank you. Also, can I get that to go, please?
Sure thing. Your total is $5.50.
So, in that conversation, we used a few key phrases that are helpful in everyday settings. Let's break some of those down for our listeners.
Good idea. One of the phrases I used was, "I'd like a large cappuccino, please." This is a polite way to ask for something in English. Saying "I'd like" sounds a bit softer than saying "I want."
Yes, and would you like any extra shots of espresso? Is also a good phrase to know, especially if you're the one working in a service job. It's a nice way of asking if the customer wants something without being too direct.
Exactly. And remember, asking questions like, "Can I get that to go, please?" is common. To go simply means you want to take it with you rather than drinking it there.
Right, and sure thing is a friendly, casual way to say yes in English. These little phrases make a big difference in making you sound natural. Let's go over a few more natural expressions our listeners can use. James, what are some other phrases that can help in everyday situations?
One sparsh. One that's really useful is, "I'll take," as in, "I'll take a large cappuccino." It's short, simple, and you can use it to order or request almost anything, like, "I'll take a burger," or "I'll take the bus."
Yes, and another one is, "Can I get?" You can use this phrase in so many situations. "Can I get some help with this?" Or, "Can I get a coffee?" It's casual but polite, and people use it all the time.
And one last expression is, "How much is it?" You can use it when you want to ask for the price of something. It's a simple question, but it's very practical.
Now, let's go through that coffee shop conversation again, a little more slowly this time. This will help our listeners get used to the pace and pronunciation.
Right, here we go.
Hi, I'd like a large cappuccino, please.
Of course. Would you like any extra shots of espresso in that?
Yes. I'll take one extra shot. And can you add a little cinnamon on top?
Absolutely. We'll have that ready for you in just a moment.
Great, thank you. Also, can I get that to go, please?
Sure thing. Your total is $5.50.
So, Emma, now that we've walked through some examples, let's talk about the process of thinking in English. One way to start is by describing what you see around you in English. What do you think?
Yes, that's one of my favorite techniques. You can start by looking around you and simply naming things in English. For example, if you're sitting in your room, you can say to yourself, I see a desk, a computer, a chair. Then try to make sentences like, the chair is next to the desk. This builds vocabulary and sentence structure.
Right. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even just thinking, I'm holding my phone, or the sun is shining, helps shift your brain into English mode.
And here's another tip. Set small goals for yourself. Maybe each day you commit to thinking in English for 5 minutes. Just narrate your day to yourself. What are you doing? How do you feel?
Great advice, Emma. Another thing that helps is using mental starter phrases that you can practice. Things like, I think that, in my opinion, or I'd like to. These phrases can help you begin sentences and keep the conversation going, even if it's just in your head.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure of a word or phrase, don't be afraid to look it up and learn something new. Language learning is a journey. It's all about progress.
You know, Emma, when I first started learning Spanish, I kept a small notebook of phrases that I used every day. It was like a little language diary. I'd write down things I wanted to say in Spanish, and if I didn't know a word, I'd look it up. It was a simple habit, but it helped a lot.
That's such a good idea. I did something similar when I was learning French. I'd jot down phrases I heard in conversations, then practice saying them out loud. I feel like learning these real-life phrases made a huge difference.
Yes, and it also helps build confidence. When you start using phrases you know work well in everyday situations, it makes speaking less intimidating.
So, what do you think, James? This is something that every language learner dreams of, right?
Thinking and speaking in English smoothly can seem like a huge mountain to climb at first. But with the right techniques and a bit of practice, it's definitely achievable. I think it's about creating an environment in your mind where English becomes as natural as your first language.
I remember when I was learning Spanish, it helped so much just to immerse myself in the language daily. You don't have to be living in an English-speaking country to do this. But if you surround yourself with English as much as possible, it'll eventually start to feel more natural, right?
Absolutely, Emma. And one thing I recommend is to start simple. Don't pressure yourself to think of complicated sentences right away. Start with everyday phrases. For instance, think about what you say every morning when you wake up, like, I need a coffee, or it's a beautiful day. Try to make those phrases automatic in English. Soon, your brain will be wired to process these phrases without translating from your first language.
I love that, James. And I think one reason people struggle is because they try to translate from their native language into English in their head. And that's exhausting. Imagine having to do that with every sentence you say. Instead, try to form the habit of thinking directly in English. Maybe by labeling things around you in English or narrating what you're doing in English as if you were describing it to someone.
Oh, that's such a good point. I call that mental English labeling. You know, like you're in the kitchen, and instead of thinking, I'm cutting the bread in your native language, you say it in English. I'm cutting the bread. Or I'm pouring the water. This sounds simple, but it's surprisingly effective. You're training your mind to recognize actions and things in English.
Exactly. It's a habit you have to build. Another thing I like to do is English time. This is when you commit a certain time of the day to think only in English. Maybe start with 5 or 10 minutes, then gradually increase the time as you get more comfortable. This practice forces you to push through any blocks you have with the language.
Yes, I love that idea. And you can even combine it with other activities you enjoy. Let's say you like cooking or working out. Use those moments to think in English. For example, if you're cooking, think about the ingredients, the recipe steps, all in English. Narrate it as if you're hosting a cooking show. This makes it fun, and you'll forget that you're even practicing.
Right. And here's another trick. Expose yourself to English in small bursts throughout the day. You could start with listening to short English podcasts or watching YouTube videos. The key is consistency. The more your brain hears the language, the more it gets used to it.
That's so true. Listening to native speakers regularly can make a huge difference. And don't be discouraged if you don't understand everything at first. Just let yourself listen. Your brain is absorbing more than you think. And little by little, it'll start to click.
Exactly. And something that's often overlooked is talking to yourself in English. It sounds a bit silly, but it's a great way to practice. You could describe what you're doing, talk about your day, or even express your feelings. Like, I had a tough day at work, but I'm proud of myself for handling it. You're rehearsing sentences you might actually use in a conversation.
Yes, I do that too. And to add to that, if you feel nervous about speaking in front of others, self-talk helps you build confidence in a private, low-stress way. Plus, you start getting comfortable hearing your own voice in English, which is so important.
Definitely. I think we all need that warm-up. Also, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, learning a language is a journey. If you make a mistake, it just means you're learning. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it's all part of the process.
That's such good advice, Emma. We often put too much pressure on ourselves to sound perfect. But mistakes are actually a huge part of how we improve. I remember when I started learning French, I would always mix up words. But over time, I started to get more comfortable, and those mistakes taught me so much.
Exactly, James. I'd say make friends with your mistakes. And if you're really aiming to think in English naturally, try to connect with the language emotionally too. Instead of just memorizing phrases, try to associate them with your own life. Think of English not as something you're learning, but as something that's becoming a part of your world.
Yes, language is about more than just words. It's about feelings too. For example, if you're learning a phrase like, "I'm so grateful," try to actually think of a time when you felt grateful and say it. Feel it. This helps you remember phrases more deeply.
Absolutely. And something else that might help is setting small, achievable goals. For example, decide that today you'll think in English for 10 minutes while cooking, or you'll have a conversation with a friend in English. These little victories add up and make a big difference.
And celebrate those wins. Learning a language is a huge accomplishment, and each little step forward is worth celebrating. So even if you just say, "Good job, me," at the end of the day, it reinforces the idea that you're getting better.
Yes. And don't forget, learning to think and speak in English is not a race. Everyone has their own pace, and that's okay. Enjoy the process and be proud of the progress you're making. Every word you learn is a step closer to fluency.
Well said, Emma. And remember, if you're listening and practicing along with us, you're already on the right path. Keep at it, and before you know it, you'll be thinking and speaking in English without even realizing it.
Let's keep the conversation going with some practical exercises that you can try every day. One technique that worked well for me when I was learning a new language was using flashcards. But instead of just writing the word, I'd create a sentence with it, or use it in a way that felt meaningful to me. What do you think about flashcards, James?
I think they're fantastic. And you don't need anything fancy. You can make flashcards with small pieces of paper, or even just use an app on your phone. One tip I'd add is to practice using the new words in context, just like you mentioned. So instead of just learning book, you could learn, "I'm reading a book." It helps you see how words fit naturally into sentences.
Yes, context is everything. And once you start seeing how words connect, it becomes easier to think in sentences rather than individual words. And on that note, something else that can help is reading out loud. You don't have to read for long periods, even just a few sentences. When you hear yourself speaking English, it builds familiarity and confidence.
Absolutely. And if you're a bit shy, reading to yourself out loud is a great way to practice without any pressure. It also gives you a chance to work on pronunciation. You can even record yourself and play it back to hear how you sound. At first, it might feel strange, but over time, you'll notice progress.
That's a great point, James. And don't forget, if you feel stuck with certain phrases or topics, it's okay to repeat them until you feel comfortable. Repetition is key in language learning. If you go over the same sentence structure or vocabulary daily, it starts becoming second nature.
Exactly. And speaking of repetition, one technique that's really powerful is shadowing. It's where you listen to a native speaker and then repeat what they say immediately after them, trying to match their tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. This exercise helps you get used to the natural flow of English.
Oh yes, shadowing is so effective. I love that it helps with intonation and rhythm, two things that make you sound more fluent. You can shadow anything, a podcast, a YouTube video, or even a movie. Just listen and repeat. It really makes you feel like you're speaking naturally.
And it's also a great way to train your brain to think in English without needing a translation. If you do this regularly, your brain starts recognizing phrases and patterns, making it easier to recall them when you're actually speaking.
That's so true, James. And for anyone listening, remember that building fluency isn't about perfection. It's about being able to express yourself and communicate. If you can share your thoughts, even if it's not perfect, you're already succeeding.
Exactly, Emma. Communication is the goal. I think another helpful tip is to learn phrases that express common thoughts and feelings. For example, I think that, or in my opinion. These are phrases we use all the time in conversation, and having a few of these ready can help you jump into conversations more naturally.
Yes, learning these starter phrases can help ease you into speaking. You can even have a mental list of a few go-to phrases when you're not sure what to say. Like, "That's interesting," or "Can you explain more about that?" These simple phrases can keep a conversation going and give you a moment to gather your thoughts.
Exactly. And one more tip that might sound simple but is very powerful. Practice patience with yourself. Learning to think in another language takes time, so don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't come overnight. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small.
That's right, James. Every single step counts. And learning to think and speak in English is a gradual process. But with consistency, a bit of creativity, and these small habits, it will start to feel natural. So, to everyone listening, keep practicing and remember, it's all about progress, not perfection.
Well said, Emma. Actually, Emma, before we wrap up completely, let's try something fun and interactive for our listeners. What if we give them a few phrases to practice thinking in English right now?
Oh, that's a great idea, James. We can give them some common phrases and they can try using them in their thoughts or in sentences about their day. Let's keep them simple but useful, right?
Absolutely. Okay, here's a classic one to start with. What am I doing today? It's such a simple question, but it's perfect for thinking in English. You can even practice answering it. Today, I am going to work. Or, I'm meeting a friend. This gets you used to talking about plans.
I love that. And here's another good one. How do I feel right now? It's a great way to connect with your emotions in English. You could answer with, I feel happy, or I'm a little tired. It's a helpful way to check in with yourself and also practice basic sentences.
Yes, that's a fantastic one, Emma. And to build on that, listeners could even add reasons. For example, I feel tired because I had a long day, or I feel happy because I got good news. This adds some depth to their sentences and gives them a bit more practice with describing their thoughts.
Exactly. Another good phrase could be, what do I want to accomplish today? It's a practical one, and it's great for building confidence. You can say, I want to learn 5 new English words, or I want to practice speaking for 10 minutes. These small goals keep you focused and motivated.
Great suggestion, Emma. And here's another simple one that could be used often. What do I see around me? It helps you build vocabulary by describing the objects or people around you. For example, I see a blue notebook on my desk, or I see people walking outside. It's an easy way to think in English using the environment around you.
That's such a good one, James. You're right. It helps you connect words with real objects, which makes it easier to remember vocabulary. And it's something you can practice anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening, try using these phrases throughout your day. Take a moment to ask yourself these questions in English and answer them as naturally as you can. The more you practice, the easier it will get.
Yes, and remember, it's okay if it feels awkward at first. Like with anything new, the beginning can feel strange, but it'll start feeling natural with time. The goal is to make English a part of your daily thinking.
And one last tip before we go. If you want a bit of extra help, try writing these thoughts down in a journal. Writing in English helps reinforce the language in your mind, and you'll be able to see your progress over time.
Yes, writing is such a powerful tool. Even if you write just a few sentences a day, it adds up. And if you don't know how to say something, you can look it up and learn new vocabulary in the process. It's like creating your own little English learning journey.
Well said, Emma. So, there you have it, everyone. A whole list of tips, phrases, and activities to help you think and speak in English more easily. Remember, the key is consistency and making English a natural part of your daily life.
All right, listeners, now it's your turn. We want to hear from you. What challenges do you face when trying to think and speak in English? Have you tried any of these techniques before?
Yes, and if you haven't, we'd love to know which tips you're excited to try. Are you going to start describing things around you? Or maybe you'll try out some of our key phrases.
Let us know in the comments or reach out on social media. We're here to help you on this journey, and we'd love to see how you're progressing.
Yes, and we'd love to hear about your progress. If you have any questions or want to share your experiences, reach out to us. We're here to support you, and we can't wait to see how you're all improving. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you found these tips helpful and that you're ready to start thinking and speaking in English with more confidence. Don't forget to check out our latest episodes if you're looking for more tips and insights on learning English.
Yes. Remember, language learning takes time and practice, so be patient with yourself. With consistency, thinking in English will start to feel more natural. Until next time, keep practicing, keep speaking, and keep pushing yourself. You've got this. Bye, everyone.